Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Rainey and I want to thank you for stopping by to check out this latest video in what will ultimately be a 5-part series. It started a couple of weeks ago when I did a YouTube video about quick and easy cloud techniques and watercolor using watercolor. And so what I thought would be a good idea is to try to take those little studies and turn them into little mini masterpieces, or try to turn them into mini masterpieces. I know over the years when I have done little studies and not brought them to completion, I end up with a pile of unfinished artwork that can sometimes feel burdensome and heavy. And so I thought it would be a good idea to take those little studies and try to turn them into little mini masterpiece landscapes. So I want you to get your brush, get your paints, and or get your coffee and just come along. Let's see how this latest piece comes out. Okay, what I've done here is I've started with the little study that I did a couple of videos ago. This is I'm doing the little puffy serious clouds, the little beautiful sweeping clouds that look puffy and soft. And this is just wet paper with your paint applied. Not in every area. You can see I'm leaving some of the white that is supposed to represent clouds. And this is all done while the paper is wet. You can see the paper is pretty wet because it's shiny. When the paper is shiny like that, you forfeit some of your control. But that's okay because look what a beautiful effect you can get. You can see that I did a little bit of tilting and lifting, and that way you can control to a certain degree how far your paint will move on the paper. Then once you're satisfied, you put it flat and let it dry. So what you see here is what the plan is for each little study. Before I begin, typically I will give myself some very light marks on the paper as guidance, particularly if I'm having some architecture in there. I will take a little bit of time to get some accuracy and perspective and so forth, and that's what I did here. So I gave guidance lines using a 2H pencil. I use a 2H. H is for hardness and B is for blackness. So you wouldn't want to use a B pencil on watercolor paper because then some of the graphite residue will get mixed into the paint as you go. And I find the 2H, it seems to be a good middle of the road pencil to give your initial sketch. Now, if you have a very complex sketch, you're going to want to do that whole complex sketch and transfer it either using a light box or tracing paper or other techniques to transfer. But for this one, it's loose and it's simple, and so I just use those guide lines using a 2H pencil. And then I laid in the water reflecting of the sky. It's the Chittenden Reservoir, which isn't very far from here. It's a beautiful spot. I actually went with Jonathan and Calico, my son Jonathan and Calico, his wife. We went up there. They called me. Jonathan called me one day last summer, and he said, "Mom, I know you're going to say no, but do you want to go kayaking with us?" And I thought to myself, I better say yes because I may never get asked again. And so I did say yes. And I'm not the best swimmer in the world, so I was a little nervous. And there were a few other, we all have baggage in our lives, and so, there was all kinds of baggage about, being able to get in and out of the kayak and so on and so forth. But I did say yes, and I went anyway. And I can tell you that I had a wonderful time. I would do it again. I'm grateful that I was asked the first time. So that was up on the Chittenden Reservoir, which is what this little body of water is. It's really lovely. So I'm going to see if I can find you a picture of me in my kayak. I used Jonathan's kayak, actually. And I was a sight to behold, let's just put it that way. But I had a great time. So anyway, getting back to this little mini sketch. These images are approximately 3 inches by 4 inches, so they're very small. I paint small for the most part. Sometimes I paint even smaller than this, but I typically will not go much over a quarter sheet of watercolor paper. And so I have a lot of small brushes, and I like the intimacy of small paintings. So if you are going to be painting larger, you're going to have to invest in larger brushes, and then you're going to need to prepare in advance to mix, you know, the amount of paint that you need for a larger piece. But I find that if you're just getting started, a small piece of paper is easier to conquer than a half sheet of paper. And it's also easier to waste in case it doesn't come out. But of course, I push it to the hilt to try to make sure that it does come out, at least to a point of satisfaction. It's funny. I noticed there was a little strip of pink paint that got onto this little piece of paper before we started this, and I tried to lift it off as best I could, but you may have noticed it was right in the bottom, in the middle of the paper. And so I was going to have to put shadows in the snow, you know, in the foreground anyway. And a lot of times there are pinks and purples in the snow, so it was easy to disguise it. And it forced me to change the shape of the foreground grasses, which I believe ultimately it worked out perfectly fine. It's sometimes, you know, when you are a painter, you have to be a troubleshooter. You have to be a problem solver. And so a lot of times the images that we're using, we need to change them. For example, you notice that the image that I used, the sky looks nothing like the sky that we produced on our sample. So that's just artistic license, you know. If you wanted to keep it just like the image that was on the photo, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to change it, that's the beautiful thing about being an artist. We have the control to change things, to make a better design, make a more interesting design. And so that's in our control. So this is done primarily on dry paper. I have little miniature, like little mini washes. So I'll apply a little bit of paint, and then while that paint's wet, I might add a little bit more dark. And so that's wet on wet, but it's in a very small controlled area. So this is, you know, sometimes the wet on wet techniques can feel very out of control if you're just getting started with watercolor. But as you move forward with the details, the paper, for the most part, will be dry in most areas. So the one thing I would say is try not to be afraid to try watercolor. I know it has a reputation for being difficult to handle, but if you practice, the rewards are great, and the process is really enjoyable. So let's see. So you can see I'm laying in a lot of the fine details with that fine brush. And what I'm trying to narrow down here is I need a good value pattern. So that is your darks and your lights. That's part of the design. So you want it to be interesting. You know, it doesn't have to be precise. It doesn't have to be an exact copy of the photo. But you need to be able to look at it and say, yeah, that's a mountain, that's a lake. If you got a yes on all those, then you know it's been a successful piece. Forgive my camera, it keeps shaking, and I'm not sure why that is. But I do appreciate your bearing with me on it. I'll have to double check that problem. So here you can see I'm just layering, making it darker and darker. I want that to be what you're looking at, that house, the trees surrounding it, leading you to the lake, and then coming back around again. So it's simple and it's fun and it's nearly finished. So there's number 1 and there's number 2. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you for stopping by. There's my dog Tucker, and here's his favorite activity. Yes, his favorite activity, chasing the ball. He would do it for hours.
Okay, you ready?
Anyway,
Let's go.
go be creative. Thank you for watching.